to extend by 30 days the measures currently in place at the border. This is an important decision which will protect citizens on both sides of the border.
I also want to address the tragic RCAF plane crash in Kamloops over the weekend. My thoughts and the thoughts of all Canadians are with the families of Captain Casey, Captain McDougall, and the entire Snowbirds team. This has been a very difficult few weeks for members of the Canadian Armed Forces. As we mourn, we remember Captain Casey as a proud Nova Scotian and an outstanding servicewoman, a journalist who turned her talents to the forces. She will be remembered not just for her professionalism, but for her sense of humor and for her kindness. As we honor her, we pay tribute to the bravery of all those who serve today. Our women and men in uniform are always there for us, serving overseas to defend the values we hold dear, working here at home to care for our seniors and lift our spirits with flyovers. So to everyone who so proudly wears the maple leaf, thank you. You do your country proud, today and every day. In
the wake of the tragic crash of a plane of the Royal Canadian Air Force over the weekend, Canadians stand with the family of Captain Casey, Captain McDougall, and the entire Snowbirds team. As we mourn the death of another heroine, we pay tribute to the courage of all of those who serve our country. Every day, you make us proud.
As we start to carefully and gradually reopen our economy, a lot of people will be wondering what that means for them. If you've been laid off, you're probably waiting to see whether your employer will start up your workplace and rehire you. To help them do that, we've extended the wage subsidy through the summer. This is about getting people back to work and giving businesses the confidence to reopen, rehire, and even grow. Because the way our economy will recover and the way our country will remain resilient and successful is by getting Canadians back to work. Many business owners are already benefiting from this program to rehire and maintain the crucial link between workplace and employee. To employers looking to start up again, please rehire your workers. Use the wage subsidy for their paycheck. That's what it's there for. And for businesses that still need help, today we're taking another step forward. Today I can announce that we are expanding the eligibility of the Canada Emergency Business Account. If you are the sole owner-operator of a business, if your business relies on contractors, or if you have a family-owned business and you pay employees through dividends, you will now qualify. For example, for a hair salon owner with stylists who rent chairs, for a local physiotherapist, for an independent gym owner with contracted trainers. This is for you. We'll have more details very soon about when you'll be able to apply. But we heard you when you said you needed a hand. That's why Minister Ng is also working on potential solutions to help business owners and entrepreneurs who operate through their personal bank account as opposed to a business account or have yet to file a tax return, such as newly created businesses. And, as we announced last week, there's new funding for regional development agencies too, which you can always contact if you still don't meet these expanded criteria. Businesses like yours are the backbone of our economy and the lifeblood of our communities. And whether it's with the CEBA or the expanded wage subsidy, we're in your corner.
In order to help small business owners cover their expenses, we are expanding eligibility for the Canada Emergency Business Account. Already, more than 600,000 small businesses have received a $40,000 loan under this program. But we know that there are more people out there who need help. So, if you are the only owner and employee of a business, if your business depends on contract workers, or if your business is a family-owned business and you pay employees with dividends, you will also be eligible. For example, if you have a hair salon where your stylists rent their chairs, or you're a self-employed physiotherapist, or the owner of a gym that employs contract trainers, the program will be there for you. We are working hard so that people can keep their jobs or return to work, and we're doing that by helping small businesses that are so important in our communities, because that is how Canada can fire up again. Of course, so that we can get through this crisis, we also have to have enough medical material and personal protective equipment so that people can stay healthy and safe. This morning, I'd like to update Canadians on personal protective equipment. In recent weeks, we have doubled our inventory of surgical masks and face shields. This week and in the coming weeks, hundreds of thousands of hospital gowns, face shields, glasses, and swabs will be delivered to the provinces and territories. We have also received an order of ventilators from Zoll in the United States. And because we want that equipment to be produced here in Canada as much as possible, we continue to increase our production capacity. We have now let 15 contracts right across the country to manufacture hospital gowns. And in fact, we will start receiving hospital gowns from the Montreal company Samuelson between now and the end of the month.
Some good news, something we haven't had enough of lately. As of today, Canada now has its first university in the north. Yukon College is becoming the new Yukon University. And as a cornerstone for this step, our government has already provided $26 million for a new science building. To everyone who helped make this milestone happen, congratulations. Not just for students, but for all of us. This is truly something to celebrate. Young people have the power to change our country for the better, and it's up to us to make sure that no matter where they live, they have the tools to chase their dreams and succeed. Today, more than ever, we need their vision and their creativity, because that is our path forward. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va commencer la période des questions par le téléphone aujourd'hui. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. Première question, Michel Lamarche, TVA. À vous.
Monsieur Trudeau, d'abord une question
First of all, a question about the border. Was there more pressure from the provinces to maintain the closure of the border until June? And is it the same thing on the United States? Maybe an indeterminate closure of the border? Well, we have had a lot of discussions with the provinces over the recent weeks, and there was a clear desire to keep the current measures in place at the border. As you know, that is a source of vulnerability for all of us in terms of cases of COVID-19 coming into our country. So we will extend those measures, and the Americans were completely open to doing that for a further 30 days. Follow-up? Yes, I'd like you to comment on the reopening of businesses in Montreal. Do you have any concerns about what's happening in Montreal? And are you comfortable with the idea of doing some shopping in Montreal? Well, yesterday I had a conversation with a number of small business owners in my riding over the internet, virtually, of course. And what I heard from them are their concerns, but also their desire to re-engage and to gradually reopen their businesses. So I know that some businesses on the island of Montreal and right across the country will be making the right decisions, will be very careful. And of course, there are many consumers out there, even if they would like to be able to help their local businesses to thrive, they have some concerns. So this will have to be done very carefully to ensure that we can reopen the businesses safely and gradually. And I, too, would like to be able to go to various businesses in the coming days. But it's very important to continue to follow public health advice and practice physical distancing.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Kate Bolingaro, Bloomberg. Line open.
Hi, Prime Minister. So on this news regarding the border extension, I am wondering when exactly will Canada open its international borders, and do you foresee that there will be further extensions to this border closure beyond June 21st?
As we've seen, the decisions that we're taking are very much made week to week in this crisis. The situation is changing rapidly, and we're adjusting constantly to what is the right measures for Canadians to get that balance right between keeping people safe and restoring a semblance of normality and the economic activity that we all rely on. We're going to keep making those decisions as time goes on. It was the right thing to further extend by 30 days our closure of the Canada-U.S. border to travelers other than essential services and goods. But we will continue to watch carefully what's happening elsewhere in the world and around us as we make decisions on next steps. We
recognize that the situation is changing very, very quickly, and we have to make the appropriate decisions depending on the circumstances. Right now, it's important to extend that agreement and the current restrictions at the border for a further 30 days. But 30 days from now, of course, we will have further discussions and look at what else is happening around the world and what the situation is across Canada, and make the decisions that are right for Canada and appropriate at that time. At every step, we have to make the right decisions depending on the circumstances.
And just a quick question regarding the LEAF program. So it seems that it's been delayed now that we're leaving mid-May when it was supposed to be open. So I'm wondering, when will this rental subsidy program be unveiled, and what's the holdup?
We were pleased to announce the large employers emergency financing facility a number of days ago now. We're continuing to work with industry, with various partners to fine-tune the program so it's the right thing. It is designed to be a lender of last resort for many big employers. We know that big companies have greater access to capital than small businesses, which is why we helped small businesses right away and very generously. But large companies can access borrowed capital on capital markets around the world, and we hope they're going to be able to do that. But if they are unable to, the LEAF will be there to offer them support, to lend them money to get through this COVID situation. We're continuing to work with them on making sure that it rolls out as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Marika Walsh, the Globe and Mail. Line open.
Hi, Prime Minister. Thank you. I'm wondering if you can tell us what your approach is going to be on Keystone XL. What, if anything, can you do if the Democratic candidate is going to cancel the project?
A couple of years before becoming Prime Minister, I went down to Washington to advocate for the Keystone XL pipeline. It has been a long position of mine that we need to get our resources to new markets safely and securely, and that's why I've always advocated for the Keystone XL pipeline. We saw the previous Democratic administration cancel it, and we will continue to work with whatever government gets elected in the United States to impress upon them how important Canada is as a secure and reliable supply of energy that they require, even as we move forward to a different future. Okay. J'ai toujours défendu
I have always defended the Keystone XL project. 2 years before I was elected Prime Minister, I went to Washington to drive home the message that Canadian energy continues to be used in the United States. And of course, I will work with whichever government is elected to remind that administration that Canada is a safe and reliable source of the energy that they require. But we will continue to show that we will move forward responsibly by working with our partners.
Yeah, so my question was, though, what you will do going forward. But I do want to pivot to Parliament. Andrew Scheer is calling for more in-person sittings. What is your position on how or when Parliament should return?
I think as with everything, we need to be cautious and responsible in how we reopen and restart all sectors of the Canadian economy. We understand that it is extremely important to have a strong democracy and strong institutions, not in spite of the crisis, but because of the crisis. And that's why we've been very pleased with extremely effective virtual sittings combined with in-person sittings over the past weeks that have allowed MPs from every corner of the country to participate fully in asking questions in the work that Parliament is doing. My concern is that as we reopen, if we reopen with reduced numbers without virtual sittings, there will be many, many MPs from further parts of the country who will be unable or unwilling to come to Ottawa because of their family's safety, and therefore there will be parts of the country that won't be reflected in our democratic institutions. We've put forward proposals that combine both virtual sittings and in-person sittings to continue the approach we have right now. We look to good conversations with other parties on figuring out that right balance as we move forward safely in upholding the importance of our democracy.
Thank you. Operator, dernière question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Now, what changes have been made to the arrangement between Canada and the U.S.? Well, for now, we are continuing with the exact same agreement. Of course, there are still discussions underway to determine whether other changes are needed or any adjustments are needed. But for now, it's the same agreement. Follow up? Yes, there's a provision in that agreement that has to do with sending back asylum seekers. Is that still in there? And do you intend to ask that that provision stay in place? Yes, we are continuing with the same measures that were in place for asylum seekers for the next 30 days. Now, obviously, this is a situation we've been experiencing for a number of time. We've had irregular asylum seekers coming into Canada, and we have been seeking some way to resolve that situation that reflects our values and principles as a country, and also working in good faith with our southern partner. We are continuing our discussions on that, but at every step of the way, we will ensure that we are abiding by our values and our principles.
Hi, Prime Minister Tom Perry, CBC. As provinces start to reopen, testing and tracing is going to become more important. Now, we understand that came up in your call with First Ministers. What have you offered the provinces and territories in terms of support on that, and what more can you do?
The federal government has put forward a proposal that recognizes that increased contact tracing and increased testing are going to be key to a reopened Canadian economy. We need to make sure right across the country that we have a strong capacity to respond wherever there might be a resurgence or flare-up of COVID-19, and that means having significant resources at the availability of all regions and provinces. So the federal government has offered to invest in a national national framework to lead the way on testing and contact tracing. We are working with the provinces right now to ensure that it works for all of them, but we're going to be moving forward on ramping up massively our testing and our contact tracing. Okay. We know
that in a reopened economy, it will be extremely important to quickly respond if there's a resurgence of COVID-19 someplace in the country. So the federal government has decided that there has to be a massive ramping up of our ability to test and also to trace contacts that might have been infected. So we have offered to increase that capacity across the country, and we will be working with the provinces to ensure that that pan-Canadian approach can take hold. But we know that that will be absolutely critical in the days to come.
When things do start reopening, what kind of infrastructure do you want to see in terms of testing, in terms of tracing, I guess other things as well? What's it going to look like when we start allowing non-essential travel across the Canada-US border?
These are ongoing questions. We've given ourselves another month before we have to have the right answers to those questions on non-essential travel. But even now, we know that we need to do more to ensure that travelers who are coming back from overseas or from the United States as Canadians are properly followed up on, are properly isolated, and don't become further vectors for the spread of COVID-19. We're working closely with the provinces to ensure that arrival of people into Canada, even now, but certainly once we get to a point where non-essential travel picks up again in the coming months, I guess, we need to have strong measures in place, and we're looking at those closely.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Christian Noël
Good
de
morning,
Radio-Canada.
Prime Minister. Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. I want to take you to the international scene. There is a petition going around that say that Canada is not worthy of a seat on the UN, and some Canadians have signed that, particularly with respect to Indigenous issues and so on. Should Canada continue its campaign, and do you think that that will weaken our chances? Well, I don't think there's any real division on that. I think all Canadians want Canada to have a strong and reasonable voice on the international scene, and that's what we're always seeking to have. The Security Council of the United Nations is one means of ensuring that our values are shared and that we can push for more cooperation between countries and more multilateralism. And we can do that with a seat at the UN Security Council. But it is one way of pursuing our engagement with the rest of the world and not an end in itself. So with respect to people who disagree with our position on Venezuela, the dictator Maduro is illegitimate and is creating a humanitarian crisis in that country that is sending refugees fleeing to other countries in South America, and we will stand with our friends in South America and our allies there to seek a solution to this terrible crisis.
The UN Security Council seat is a means for Canada to continue its strong advocacy and presence for our values on the world stage. We know that there is a lot of reflection that needs to be had on how to handle this COVID-19 crisis and how to bring forward a better world in the coming years. I think when we reflect on the scale of this crisis, many people have compared it to what happened 75 years ago around World War II. Well, in the years following World War II, we created a range of multilateral and multinational institutions like the IMF, like the World Bank, the Bretton Woods institutions that helped the world over the following decades develop tremendous prosperity and opportunity for people right around the world. 75 years later, we have another crisis that is comparable in scale to that Second World War, and I think there need to be real reflections on how we move forward as a world, how we update and adjust our various multilateral institutions to better respond to the world we're becoming part of right now in a post-COVID era. Canada's voice is going to be really important, as it was around the forming of the Bretton Woods institutions, as it will be as we create a better, more prosperous, fairer world for everyone. And Canada having a voice at the UN Security Council will allow us to continue to be at the heart of those discussions as we move forward as a planet.
Pouvez-vous être un peu plus précis là-dessus en français?
Could you be a bit more specific on that in terms of the role Canada plays in the global fight against COVID-19? And have you used this as part of your campaign? And there are some Canadians that are saying that they don't agree. There's no unanimity in Canada. How do you respond to that? Well, we have managed the situation in Canada quite effectively, but of course we can always learn from our neighbors and our allies around the world, including multilateral fora such as the G7, the G20, La Francophonie, the Commonwealth, and all the other ones. They are helpful in terms of our ability to understand and move forward safely. And also how we can work together on the next steps to defeat this virus. At the same time, it's important to reflect on the fact that this crisis we're now in is often compared to the global crisis that occurred in World War II. And in the years following World War II, a number of international institutions were created to guide us in the coming decades. And they have worked very, very well when it comes to creating prosperity around the world. Now, we have an obligation to think on what changes and improvements to those institutions are now needed so that we can move effectively towards the 21st century. And Canada should and must be part of those discussions, not only because we are managing our economy quite well in the midst of this crisis and reflecting our values around the world, but because the next steps when it comes to rebuilding a global economy and making a fair world, a more prosperous world for all, is something that Canada can speak to with a strong voice. And that's precisely why we are seeking another means of making our strong voice heard in these international institutions.
Morning, Prime Minister Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. President Donald Trump is threatening to pull American funding from the World Health Organization and reconsidering his country's membership in that UN agencies. Now, some European countries have come to the support of the WHO. Where does Canada stand?
Canada believes that multilateral institutions like the WHO are extremely important, particularly at a time of a global health crisis like this one. No global institution is perfect, and there are obviously things we need to work on and things we need to improve about multilateralism, and that's one of the reasons why Canada has been so incredibly active over these past weeks and months, including in this crisis, to advocate for a rethinking and improvement of our global situations and our global institutions in line with our values. We will continue to do that. We will continue to support the WHO even as we look for improvements to our multilateral systems.
China has actually pledged $2 billion for the WHO, and obviously, leading up to this, the organization has faced criticism for its handling of misinformation at the beginning of this outbreak coming out of China. So are there any concerns for you that there's such a large influence in the term of funding commitment from China to the WHO?
I think there are always going to be reflections about the relationships between the largest donors to multilateral institutions and the functioning of those multilateral institutions. And I think as we move through this crisis and particularly come out of it, we will have to be asking questions about the independence and the strength of those organizations to be able to do the kinds of things that are absolutely necessary in keeping everyone around the world safe. That balance does need to be looked at carefully. There will be some real questions around China, of course, in the coming months and years that need to be answered, and we will be part of that.
Prime Minister Janet Silver, Global News. Earlier in your opening remarks, you commented on the snowbird crash over the weekend. And I'm just wondering, have you since spoken to Captain Casey's family? Have they expressed concerns about the snowbirds flying and whether or not you think they should be grounded?
I have had a couple of conversations over the past couple of days with the Minister of Defence, and I know he and others are very closely engaged with the families, and I will, of course, be speaking to the family of Captain Casey and others. I think there are very good questions being asked by a whole lot of people about safety right now, first and foremost by the RCAF, and there is going to be a proper investigation, and we're going to allow them to do their work before we make assumptions about what might be the outcome of that investigation. J'ai parlé plusieurs fois au ministre de la Défense.
I have spoken to the Minister of Defense several times over the past weekend about this terrible tragedy, and of course I will be speaking to the families involved. But for now, we need to allow the Royal Canadian Air Force conduct the investigation as to how this accident could have occurred, rather than jumping to conclusions about the safety of those aircraft.
I just want to turn south of the border. President Trump says he's been taking the malaria drug hydrochloroquine for about a week and a half now, and he says it's a good preventative approach to getting COVID-19. I just want to get your thoughts on whether or not you think it is a good preventative approach.
I will continue to follow advice of medical professionals and implore every Canadian to follow the best advice of our medical health experts.
Merci. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
All right, that is the Prime Minister of Canada on this Tuesday, just outside of his home. He is going to participate in the COVID-19 committee, which will kick off at noon. But lots of bits of news in that press conference from the PM today, specifically that the U.S.-Canada border